Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Grantharaj Bhagavatam, in Canto 4, Chapter 24, Text 28. Yap param rang hasa sakshat Trigunaj jiva sangitat Bhagavantam Vasudevam Prapanna sapriyo hime Yapparam rang hasa sakshat Trigunaj jiva sangitat Bhagavantam Vasudevam Prapanna sapriyo hime Yapparam brahmasa sakshat Trigunaj jiva sangyitat Bhagavantam Vasudevam Prapanna sapriyo hime Yaparam brahmasa sakshat Triguna jiva sangitat Bhagavantam Vasudevam Prapanna sapriyo hime Yaparam brahmasa sakshat Triguna jiva sangitat Bhagavantam Vasudevam Prapanna sapriyo hime. Matajis. Ya param ranghasa sakshat Triguna jiva sangyitat Bhagavantam Vasudevam Prapanna sapriyo hime Yapparam ranghasa sakshat Triguna jiva sangyitat Bhagavantam Vasudevam Prapanna sapriyo hime. Yaparam ranghasa sakshat Triguna jiva sangyitat Bhagavantam Vasudevam Bhagavantam sapriyo hime. Yaha, anyone. Param, transcendental. Ranghasa, of the controller. Sakshat, directly. Trigunat, from the three modes of material nature. Jiva Sangyitat, living entities called by the name of Jivas. Bhagavantam, onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vasudevam, onto Krishna. Prapannaha, surrendered. Saha, he. Priyaha, very dear. He, undoubtedly. Me, of me. Translation. Lord Shiva continued, any person who is surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Kṛṣṇa, the controller of everything, material nature as well as the living entity, is actually very dear to me. Purport. Now, Lord Shiva explains the reason he has personally come before the princes. It is because all the princes are devotees of Lord Kṛṣṇa. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 19. Bahunam janmanam mante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvam mitti sa mahatma su durlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Lord Shiva is rarely seen by common men, and similarly, a person who is fully surrendered unto Vasudeva, Kṛṣṇa, is also very rarely seen, because a person who is fully surrendered unto the Supreme Lord is very rare. Sa Mahatma Su Durlabha. Consequently, Lord Shiva came especially to see the Prachetas, because they were fully surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. Vasudeva is also mentioned in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam in the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Since Vasudeva is the ultimate truth, Lord Shiva openly proclaims that one who is a devotee of Lord Vasudeva, who is surrendered to Lord Kṛṣṇa, is actually very dear to him. Lord Vasudeva, Kṛṣṇa, is worshipable not only by ordinary living entities, but by demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and others. Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutas Tuvanti Divyais Taivaihi. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 12, Chapter 13, Text 1. Kṛṣṇa is worshipped by Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Varuna, Indra, Chandra, and all other demigods. That is also the situation with the devotee. Indeed, one who takes to Kṛṣṇa consciousness immediately becomes very dear to anyone who is simply finding out and beginning to understand what Kṛṣṇa consciousness actually is. Similarly, all the demigods are also trying to find out who is actually surrendered to Lord Vasudeva. Because the Pracheta princes were surrendered to Vasudeva, Lord Shiva willingly came forth to see them. Lord Vasudeva, or Kṛṣṇa, is described in the Bhagavad Gita as Purushottama. Actually, he is the enjoyer, Purusha, and the Supreme, Uttama, as well. He is the enjoyer of everything, the Prakriti and the Purusha. Being influenced by the three modes of material nature, the living entity tries to dominate material nature. But actually, he is not the Purusha, enjoyer, but Prakriti, as described in Bhagavad Gita 7.5. Appareyam itastvanyam prakritim vidhime param. Thus, the Jiva, or living entity, is actually Prakriti, or the marginal energy of the Supreme Lord. Being associated with the material energy, he tries to lord it over the material nature. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text 7. Mamaivangso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manasasthanindrayani prakriti sthani karshati. The living entity in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. By endeavoring to dominate material nature, the living entity simply struggles hard for existence. Indeed, he struggles so hard to enjoy himself that he cannot even enjoy the material resources. Thus, he is sometimes called Prakriti, or Jiva, for he is situated in the marginal potency. When the living entity is covered by the three modes of material nature, he is called Jiva Sangita. There are two kinds of living entities. One is called Kshara, and the other is Akshara. Kshara refers to those who have fallen down and become conditioned, and Akshara refers to those who are not conditioned. The vast majority of living entities live in the spiritual world and are called Akshara. They are in the position of Brahman, pure spiritual existence. They are different from those who have been conditioned by the three modes of material nature. Being above both Kshara and Akshara, Lord Kṛṣṇa, Vasudeva, is described in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text 18, as Purushottama. The impersonalist may say that Vasudeva is the impersonal Brahman, but actually the impersonal Brahman is subordinate to Kṛṣṇa, as also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, text 27, Brahmano hi pratisthaham. That Kṛṣṇa is the source of the impersonal Brahman is also confirmed in Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, text 40, Yasya prabha pravavato jagadananda koti. The impersonal Brahman is nothing but the effulgence or bodily rays of Kṛṣṇa, and in those bodily rays there are innumerable universes floating. Thus, in all respects, Vasudeva, Kṛṣṇa, is the Supreme Lord, and Lord Shiva is very satisfied with those who are completely surrendered to him. Complete surrender is desired by Krishna, as he indicates in the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 66. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam braja. The word sakshat, meaning directly, is very significant. There are many so-called devotees, but actually there are only karmis and gyanis, for they are not directly devotees of Lord Krishna. The karmis sometimes offer the results of their activities to Lord Vasudeva, and this offering is called karmarpanam. These are considered to be fruitive activities. For the karmis consider Lord Vishnu to be one of the demigods, like Lord Śiva and Lord Brahma. Because they consider Lord Vishnu to be on the same level with the demigods, they contend that surrendering to the demigods is as good as surrendering unto Vasudeva. This contention is denied herein because if it were true, Lord Śiva would have said that surrender unto him, Lord Vasudeva, Vishnu or Brahma is the same. However, Lord Śiva does not say this because he himself surrenders unto Vasudeva, and whoever else surrenders unto Vasudeva is very, very dear to him. This is expressed herein openly. The conclusion is that a devotee of Lord Śiva is not dear to Lord Śiva, but a devotee of Lord Krishna is very dear to Lord Śiva. Once again, the translation. Lord Śiva continued, any person who is surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kṛṣṇa, the controller of everything, material nature as well as the living entity, is actually very dear to me. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimmirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Soyam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Goratashe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, first I really would like to beg forgiveness for running late. I had a few complications this morning. It was a very unfortunate sequence of events, but very sincerely would like to beg forgiveness for that. Yes, and I'm so sorry. I beg forgiveness for all of you, and I beg forgiveness from the Vyasa-san itself as well. So, however, we have a very lovely purport from Srila Prabhupada, lots of stuff in there to discuss. I find that every week that I'm giving Bhagavatam class, when I read the purport, I feel there's never enough time to discuss even one paragraph of Prabhupada's purports. And here we have so much, right? We have the nature of Krishna's Purushottama, we have Krishna and the Devatas, we have Jiva Tattva. There's too much to be discussed here. There's the glories of the Vaishnavas. Each one of these topics you can speak hours and hours and hours on, and Prabhupada has weaved all of them together into one purport. So, what to do? This is the curse of Srimad Bhagavatam class. You'll never feel that you can do justice even to one sentence of what Srila Prabhupada has written. So, there's much to discuss, and by my own faulty nature, not enough time to discuss it. So, we'll begin with quite a few points related to this nature of Śiva. We see here that the conclusion is that a devotee of Lord Śiva is not dear to Lord Śiva, but a devotee of Lord Krishna is very dear to Lord Śiva. And so we see this is interesting, right? Because we see so often, right, people will get upset with ISKCON devotees, with Hare Krishnas, with followers of Srila Prabhupada, saying, oh, how can you say all of these things about Śiva? You're putting Śiva in a lower position. But as we are about to discuss, Śiva is very much in a high position, right? In many ways, worship of Śiva that we do is the highest thing that we can do, right? People say, oh, you're putting Śiva in a lower position by saying he's a Vaishnava. But we hold worship of the Vaishnavas to be higher than worship of Krishna. So in fact, we are worshipping Śiva in a much higher sense than even the Shaivites are, right? Our worship of Śiva is more intense, and it is more worshipable. And we see that this worship of Śiva is very well established in our sampradaya. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, we know very famously he worships one deity. Which deity? Do we know which deity it is? Which one that you? Yeah, there's another one in Bhubaneswar. There is Lingraj. Lingraj in Bhubaneswar. There is one, he's considered one of the most primary of all of the lingas in India, right? There's the Dvadasa lingas. These are the primary Shiva lingas in India. And of the most prominent is Lingraj in Bhubaneswar. And Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he went there and he ecstatically danced and worshipped this linga. This is described in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And what he does very interestingly is he also honors the Mahaprasad of this Shiv linga, right? Now this is very confusing to some people because in general, even though we give a very high position to Shiva, we normally don't take remnants of those things that are offered to Shiva. Now, of course, this seems to contradict the point that I'm making, which is that we have a lot of respect for Shiva. Why don't we take the Mahaprasad remnants? The reason is not because taking the remnants of Shiva is bad. The reason is because if we take the remnants that have been offered to Shiva in an incorrect way, or rather thinking him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead and not a Vaishnav, right? Although in one sense he is also the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and these are all the complexities. But if one is doing it in that way, this consciousness will not affect as well. But it is not meant as disrespect. Regardless, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he honored this Mahaprasad. Why did he do so? Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada writes in his commentary that actually this Mahaprasad is itself Mahaprasad. Because this Shiv Linga is actually offered the remnants of the Ananta Vasudev Murti. So what they used to do is they used to offer to They used to offer to Ananta Vasudev, and then they would take his remnants, and then they would give those to the Shiv Linga. So actually, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's taking the remnants of a Vaishnav, honoring the remnants of his Lord. This is one way to understand. Another way to understand is that actually, if you ask the Pandits, the Purohits of that temple, they will tell you that there's also a Vaishnav Shila in the temple. So they do have mantras for offering to both. And actually, the temple is not a Shiva temple, it's a Harihara temple. It's a mixed one. So that's another interesting thing. That's not the reason why Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu honored that Mahaprasad, but it's the reason why to this day, Vaishnavas in the state of Orissa, right, they will still honor the Mahaprasad there because it's a Harihara temple. Anyway, so what we see here, interestingly, is that this linga, this lingraj, right, this very prominent Shiv linga, it is worshipped by offering the remnants of Ananta Vasudev. So what is the position of Shiva, right? What is his position? He is the position of a Vaishnav, relishing the remnants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, it's described in the Brahma Vaivarta Puran, right, that the original worship of Srimati Radharani was introduced by Shiva in the material world, right? So it was manifested under his guidance. So we can see Shiva, he is having a very prominent and worshipable position. However, sometimes devotees do not appreciate this, right? And sometimes devotees or people in general can find Shiva's position or appearance peculiar. There's one pastime described in the Puranas where once Shiva, his wife, she told him I have one question for you. I have a very brief question. My question is, we hear about the Pashandis, right? We hear about these atheistic personalities, we hear about these. Can you describe, what does a Pashandi look like? What does such a peculiar atheistic person appear like? And Śiva, he said, oh, they will carry skulls. They'll wear skulls on their body. They'll smear ashes on themselves. They'll do all of these sort of things, right? Sometimes even, they'll wear the skins of animals, and they'll do all of these sort of things. At this point, Shiva's wife, she thinks, can I ask another question now? Why do you do these things? Are you a Pashandi? Are you such a personality? And Śiva, he laughs. And he says, no, I'm not. But because you are my very dear wife, I will tell you the reason why I act in such a way. And he says that in the beginning of time, all the demons were there and all the devatas were there. And the demons were becoming very, very powerful. They were becoming so powerful because they were following and they were observing this wonderful dharmic religion. And by observing this sattvic dharmic religion, they became so powerful, they became so empowered. And through this empowerment, the devatas, they were very much struggling to beat them. And struggling to beat them, the demigods began to pray and pray and pray to Vishnu. And so Vishnu, he called all of them together, and then he called Śiva as well. And he told Śiva, he said, I have a very nice seva for you. Your seva is, you'll have to dress in a tamasic way. And you'll have to preach in a tamasic way. Because if you do this, then all of the devatas will all of the asuras, they will naturally be more attracted to what you are doing than what the devatas are doing. And if by their natural propensity to be attracted to this form of presentation, they follow what you are doing, they will not become as empowered as they are now. So in this way, Śiva, he was thinking, this is a very harsh thing. Vishnu, he said, you have to go and you have to spread not only the tamasic Puranas, but you have to go and you have to give your empowerment to all of the different philosophers in all of their sampradayas, in all of their schools of thought. You have to empower each and every one of them so that they can spread their ideology. And now Śiva, he was feeling very disturbed. And he said, I don't want to do this. And then Vishnu, he said, don't worry. You simply take shelter in my holy name. And at this point, Vishnu, he spoke Vishnu Sahasranam to Śiva. And in this way, Śiva, he felt satisfied. If I can take shelter in the holy names of Vishnu, then that is fine. And so Śiva, he went out and he empowered all of these various different thinkers. Śiva, he went out and he established the recitation and paramparas of all of these different tamasic Puranas. And in this way, he established all of these things, and the asuras began to become attracted to this form of mysticism. And in this way, the devatas had victory in their hand in a much stronger way. So of course, we see in this way, Śiva, he explains this is his means of presentation. So we see, even with his form, with his way of dressing, it is all seva to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is all Vishnu seva. His way of dressing, his way of preaching, all of these things. And what is he doing constantly? He is relishing Vishnu Sahasranam in order to give him shelter while doing this. So how can we say Śiva is not but the greatest of devotees of Vishnu? Right? And by being a Vaishnava, he is on a higher platform. He is on a higher platform than anyone, perhaps even Vishnu himself. We see here, there's a point being made that Krishna is so worshipable at this high level. But so too are his devotees, right? Lord Śiva came especially to see the Prachetas because they were fully surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Śiva proclaims openly that one who is a devotee of Lord Vasudeva is actually very dear to him. So here we see not only is Vishnu so dear to Shiva, but the Vaishnav is as well. So then how can we say that it is an insult to Lord Shiva, right? How can we say that it is an insult at all to call him a Vaishnav if he is respecting so much the Vaishnavas? So in this way, this is a very high position that is afforded to Shiva. And in fact, this position is much higher than saying he is a Deva or a Devata. This position of being a demigod is an all right one, right? It is not bad, right? It is something very respectable. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he writes that such a person who disrespects anyone cannot be considered a Vaishnav. But a person who disrespects the Devatas even more so cannot be considered one. Of course, he also says, we respect the Devatas, but we do not worship them. We respect the demigods, but we do not worship them. This distinction is there. Devotees will overshoot in either direction. They will either disrespect the Devatas, which is wrong, or they will worship them, which is not wrong, right? Shastra is very clear. Desire for the karma kanda is wrong, but the karma kanda itself is worshipable, right? So we should not criticize the karma kanda path, but we should criticize the desire for it, but not the path itself. The path is given in the Vedas. It is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So sometimes devotees will overshoot another direction and have that desire to worship the Devatas, which is, if not wrong per se, it is not pure bhakti. So in this way, we see Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he has established this. Elsewhere, we see that Prabhupada says, a Deva is somebody who pleases the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All of the Vaishnavas are Devatas, right? And all of the Devatas, to an extent, are Vaishnavas. However, the demigods that we speak of, when we speak of the ones in the heavenly planets, they are, of course, a certain type of devotee. Does anyone know what type of devotee are they? They're Sakama Bhaktas, right? They are not Nishkama Bhaktas. They are devotees, but they still have some desire for material attainment, slightly there. But they've done so in the correct way, through devotion to the Supreme Personality. So we should never critique them, right? Because whatever desire, whatever ambition might have been there, they've come to Kṛṣṇa for it. But this is one reason that's given why. When Sri Narasimhadev came and he slaughtered Hiranyakashipu, and he really slaughtered him, right? When Sri Narasimhadev slaughtered Hiranyakashipu, we know very famously, all the Devatas are there. They're all surrounding, they're all watching. And what are they? They're scared, right? They're scared. And there's many reasons given by different commentators on why they were scared. But one reason that has been given is that they were scared because they thought Hiranyakashipu became like this out of his ambition. And even though we are all devotees, in our heart there is still some tiny propensity, some tiny desire to grow in our ambition. There's some tiny desire for us to grow in our position. There's some tiny desire for us still to succeed. Even though we have satisfied this in the proper and respectable way, still some propensity is there. So all of them were afraid. Narasimhadev, he's so angry right now. What if he sees this in us and he rips us up, right? So all of them are so afraid. And only Prahlad Maharaj, so Shuddha Bhakta, right? Nishkama Bhakta, he did not have that fear because there is none of that manifested in his heart. And so he walks before Narasimhadev. So in this way, we can see there's some mixture. But again, we should respect. We should respect them. They're given some position. Sometimes we take lots of pastimes, lots of quotes. Even I was mentioning last week when I was speaking about how Bhakti Dhir Damodar Maharaj, he says the reason why Brahma fell down when he was Brahma but didn't fall down when he was Haridas Thakur is because as Haridas Thakur he was not in the position of a manager, So it was much easier to not fall down, right? Bhakti Thir Damodar Maharaj, he makes this point. And so sometimes we can blast these ideas of authority, right? We can blast people who are in authority, and we can almost feel inherently somebody who has taken an authority position is bad, unless they're a pure devotee. Prabhupada was a good manager, he was a pure devotee and a manager, but some people, they are not pure devotees and they are managers. We will feel this way, that management is some sort of pop, right? But this is not correct, because we see the devatas are examples of people who are given a management position and we are asked to respect them. Prabhupada, in one morning walk, he refers to the demigods as Krishna's GBC. Prabhupada says, I have my GBC and Krishna has his GBC. And Krishna's GBC is Yamaraj, Indra, all these personalities. This is what Prabhupada says. So sometimes we will feel, oh, I want to be so disrespectful to all of the managers. The management isn't doing a good job. But no management can do as bad of a job as Indra did when he tried to flood Vrindavan, right? When he tried to kill all the Vrajvasis. And yet what did Krishna do? Indra became very repentant and Krishna reinstated him in his position, right? So we see here, sometimes people want to hold this very high ideal, and then they feel if a person is not holding up to this high ideal, I will criticize the managers. I will want to get them booted out, right? But this is not the example we see established in Shastra. We see that they should be respected. Why? Because somehow or another, by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they've been given some authority. And it is by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Does that mean that every manager we meet has to be a pure devotee? No. But that is not a criticism of managers. That is a glorification of them. Because it means that even if we see something that maybe we don't agree with, we should still be very respectful. We should not be criticizing. We should not be second-guessing. They've been given some empowerment that we can feel very lucky we have not gotten, because it's a very stressful job, right? So this is a certain empowerment. We see this, Swayambhuv Manu, right? His son, Priyavarta, he wanted him, take up this position of control, take up this position of influence. And Priyavarta did not want it. Priyavarta said, no, I do not want this position. And then Brahma himself had to come down from Brahmalok and tell him, you take this position, and then at that point he accepted it. What do we see here? Brahma himself is of course a devotee, right? Brahma here, what Brahma wants is not a bad thing. Brahma is saying, please take this position of authority, take this position of management. So to take a position of authority in the Vaishnava community or in any community means a certain type of empowerment. And that empowerment is not a bad thing. Otherwise Brahma would not ask for it. So I wanted to make some of these points in relation to this purport, also in relation to my class last week. I didn't want people to think I was saying something that I wasn't saying. I was saying that such sevas, they carry certain risks, they carry certain dangers, but such sevas are also necessary. In the same way that Krishna has his GBCs as the Devatas, Prabhupada has his GBCs in the form of the GBCs. And of course then local managers, so on and so forth. So we see this is a Shastric principle, that authority is there. And it must be respected. This is part of our Vedic culture, that such positions are respected, such personalities are respected. So, in this way, we see these individuals, these demigods, right? Even though they are not even pure devotees, we must respect them. What then to speak of managers in the Vaishnava community? They are almost certainly pure devotees. So how much more respect should we give them? We have not been empowered. That is a good news for us. We don't have to take this heavy burden of leadership. We don't have to take this heavy burden onto our shoulders. We can chant Hare Krishna, worship Gopinath, and we can have a nice time, right? So, how can we say that they're necessarily pure devotees? We hear this all the time. I want to see a pure devotee. I want to see a pure devotee. We talk about pure devotees. His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu, he says, we talk about pure devotees as if they'll glow in the dark, right? We talk about them like they're aliens. But who is a pure devotee? Srila Prabhupada writes in one letter, he says that all of my disciples are pure devotees. Now, of course, this might seem odd to us, right? How can we say? We know for a fact that not every person initiated by Srila Prabhupada continued to chant 16 rounds. We know that not everyone initiated by Srila Prabhupada continued to chant rounds at all. I've met some disciples of Srila Prabhupada who became Mayavadis. I've met others who rejected spirituality altogether, right? So how can we say that they are pure devotees? By what standard? We can say it on the standard of Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavad Gita, right? Apichetsu duracharo. We know this very famous verse. And we know that this famous verse says that this personality, who is my Ananya Bhak, right? Who is worshipping me exclusively, this person is to be declared as a sadhu. This person is to be declared as my pure devotee. We know Krishna says this in Bhagavad Gita. And yet he says, if there's an accidental fall down, this should be ignored, right? This should not be held as a delegitimizing factor. This should not be held as a criteria that dismisses the position of this person. And this is perhaps not the definition of pure devotee as a uttama adhikari, but it still is the definition of a pure devotee, of somebody who we should see all of the glorifications of a pure devotee is applying to. And so there are a few questions. What does ananya mean? And what does accidental fall down mean? Our acharyas, they say very clearly, ananya here can mean a few things. One very important thing is it means that this person does not worship the devatas. So if one person is single-mindedly only worshipping Krishna, and of course the Vaishnavas such as Śiva, right? If somebody is only worshipping the Vaishnavas and Krishna, and if somebody is not hoping to get any jnana or karma, anukulyena krishnanu anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadya navritam, right? Not covered by jnana or karma. That is what ananya means. So if we find such a person who is wanting to associate with the Vaishnavas, who is wanting to worship Krishna alone, and who is wanting to worship Krishna not for the sake of jnana, not for the sake of karma, right? We have found a pure devotee. And we know many such people, right? So many people we know. So when we speak, pure devotee, and we act like the only pure devotee who ever existed is Srila Prabhupada, this is wrong, right? There are many pure devotees. Now, are they all Uttama Adhikaris? Are they all Mahabhagavats? Who am I to say? Realistically not, right? So this is one criteria. And of course, the other criteria then is the question of the fall down, right? Prabhupada says accidental fall down. What does this mean? There's a few different places where we see accidental defined, but there's one remembrance of Srila Prabhupada. I'm trying to find in Vedabase if it's recorded somewhere. I've been looking and looking for a bit now, but I can't yet find it, but at one point, hopefully I will, right? But there's a remembrance, at least, that once when Prabhupada was walking, somebody asked Prabhupada, what is an accidental fall down? And Prabhupada said, if they come back again, then it is accidental. Right? Prabhupada said, if they come back again, then it is accidental. So then we can see, what is the standard of a pure devotee? The standard of a pure devotee is that person who at one point in time chanted Hare Krishna, did so in an ananya, in a pure way, right? And did so, and maybe stumbled, maybe left, maybe stopped practicing altogether. But one day they come back. There is Vaishnav Thakur. there is Vaishnav Gosai. There is the object of my worship. There is the object of all of my bhajan, all of my japa, all of my dharma. Right there. This person who's come back. We can all think about this. We've all experienced in our lives, especially those of us who have been practicing Krishna consciousness for at least a decade, right? In Sydney, a decade is like a long time. It's because we somehow have a relatively younger yatra, right? But a decade is a very small time to be practicing Krishna consciousness, right? But if we see people, like if I'll sometimes talk to my parents, and practicing for nearly half a century now, right? Right, and when you talk to them, you'll hear, or even in our smaller time, right, a decade or so, right, of bhakti, we all joined with other people, and those people left, right? We've all seen this in our time. We've practiced Krishna consciousness. We've practiced our sadhana, and we've seen that the people who we used to chant our rounds with, the people we used to read Prabhupada's books with, not all of them are practicing Krishna consciousness anymore, right? We can think of the first bhakti vriksha we attended, or the first outreach program, and we can think of all of those happy faces of all of those Vaishnavas who were there with us, and we can think how many are not here today, right? And we can think of how so many of those people inspired us so much when we saw them, right? They were a sincere form of inspiration. How many people who were brahmacharis were inspired to join the ashram by a person who is no longer a brahmachari, or maybe is no longer practicing Krishna consciousness. And yet that inspiration was there. And people can become confused, they can become disturbed, they can wonder, was that inspiration real? Was I a fool to be inspired by these other people? But no, they were all Vaishnav Thakur. Because one day they will come back to Krishna consciousness. And when they do, then they'll be reinstated as a pure devotee. Right? Then that accidental fall down will end. And we'll be able to greet them. And we'll be able to smile. And we'll be able to appreciate so much the genuine flow of bhakti that we saw in them. So this is the pure devotee. This is the nature of the Vaishnav. And so in this way, we can see the standard of who is a pure devotee. So then, how can we speak disparagingly? How can we speak dismissively about the devotees who have taken up this great service of leading and managing our movement? Right? Of course, we might disagree with some decisions. But this does not invite criticism and disrespect. In the devatas, what then to speak about the pure devotees, right? What then to speak there? So, in this way, I understand this. I'll conclude with a final point, just regarding this nature of the jiva, and then we'll wrap up with the remaining 2 minutes, right? We see here there's mention of the 2 types of living entities, kshara and akshara, right? And of course we hear about these things, some choose to go here, some choose to go there. Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in Jaiva Dharma that whenever we hear about this language of origins and of first choice and all of these things, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that the first choice, the original choice, all of these things, this is language that has been given, and this is language that has been used to explain something that is actually impossible for us to understand. So we will hear all these different descriptions, originally choosing to do this, originally choosing to do that. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur says the reason why these things are hard to harmonize is because these are all sort of explanatory stories to help explain our condition right now of something that is achintya, inconceivable, right? However, the nature of the jiva is that it has an abhiman, an active identity of a svabhav of being Krishna Das. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita says this, right? That it is an identity, an abhiman, to be a devotee. that is being suppressed, that is being hidden, right? There is bhakti, which is the Swarup Shakti of the Lord, right? And this Swarup Shakti is there and it is available for the jiva to use. But the jiva does not choose to use it. The jiva instead chooses to engage with the material energy outside of it. This is what it means to choose, right? What it means to choose is that the jiva can choose to act with the Swarup Shakti, the internal potency of Krishna. But instead, it chooses to use the Mahamaya, the external energy of Krishna. This is the choice that is presented for the jiva. Both Shaktis are there. Tatastha, right? Marginal. Marginal means that by the mercy of Guru and Gauranga, it can use the Swarup Shakti that is present. But instead, it chooses to enter into this world of Maya. Does this make sense? In this way, not only is there an original choice of the jiva, perhaps, to enter into this world, but more importantly, there is a continuing choice of the jiva in every moment to stay in the material world. So people will say, maybe there was an original desire to be here, but I don't want to be here anymore. But this is not correct. We always want to be here. We are actively choosing to embed ourselves deeper and deeper and deeper into the material world. Anyways, I don't have time to get into that Siddhanta. There's some interesting points from our acharyas on this nature of the Swarup Shakti and how it relates to the jiva. But I thought I'll leave that for another week with how much time is there, and I thought I'll speak the pastimes and stuff like that instead. So another week perhaps we'll discuss, there's some very interesting stuff about the Shakti of the jiva. Okay. Questions or no questions, Prabhu? Okay. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.